Welcome, it's home movie time. This is a little blast from my past. One of the things I used to do was live-scale role-playing through the International Fantasy Gaming Society, or the IFGS. What we would do is get together on weekends to go out and have these adventures. I'm playing the role of the team's priest, and so I'm healing the party and beating up the bad guys. One product of these years is Call of Cthulhu Live. I was one of the co-authors of the first edition, and I was involved with creating the combat system for this game. I stopped doing this because it took so much time to actually put these things together, and so I moved on to board games, because board games didn't take a lot of time. Somehow, though, I've managed to stumble into a hobby related to board games called video production, which takes just as much time as it took to put on these games. Oh well. So, board game designers have captured these fantasy adventures in fantasy adventure board games. I'm going to talk about my favorite one, Prophecy, today on Board Games with Scott. Why hello, adventurer! Are you looking for Board Games with Scott? Well, you have found it. Here in Board Games with Scott, I talk about a variety of board games. And today, we shall talk about fantasy adventure board games. Alright, enough of that. Anyway, hi there, this is Scott Nicholson, host of Board Games with Scott. And as you saw in my past life, I used to do a lot of live-scale role-playing. And that's where a lot of the costumes and the things that you see in this show have come from. Before we get too far into this, there are two games I want to mention briefly to get them out of the way. The first is Dungeons and Dragons. The new edition of Dungeons and Dragons, the 4th edition, does play a lot like a board game. It feels like a tactical miniatures game where you're moving around and casting spells and things like that, but it's got the ability to role play as well. However, this requires a dungeon master, who is someone who will tell you the story and dictate what's going on and facilitate a gaming experience. Now, an attempt to create Dungeons and Dragons in a board game made Descent. Now, Descent is a game that requires an overlord, and that player is against the characters. This is really a tactical miniatures battle game. What's going to happen in this game, unlike Dungeons and Dragons, in D&D and most role-playing games, the game master is facilitating an experience for the players. The idea is that the players will eventually win, but they'll struggle on the way to do it. With Descent, it really pits one player against everyone else, and the game is designed to be balanced so that the overlord versus the players is a good combat that goes on throughout the game. Now, this is a game where you can play multiple times, building up your characters each time, but the overlord also gets stronger. But these games I'm not talking about. I'm focusing today on these fantasy adventure board games that do not require a game master, and the game is telling you the story as you play it. Now, today I'm going to be talking about fantasy adventure board games. Now, in these games, they're all very similar in that you are a character going through some sort of fantasy world, working through gaining strength, gaining treasure, gaining items, and trying to become the strongest, or trying to get certain items, or trying to gain the most victory points. There's a number of ways you win these games. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite games of the genre, called Prophecy, and then afterwards, I'm going to talk about some of these other games and a little bit about how they're different and why I like Prophecy over the rest of these games. They're all driven by cards. You'll draw a card, the card is a monster, or a tavern, yay, or some treasure, hee hee, and that'll help you to increase your character's strength, to become more wily, or to better deal with situations in the game. So why don't we get right into the game I'm going to talk about today, and that is Prophecy. Now in Prophecy, what you're doing is you're traveling around a world, you're going to increase your character's abilities, you're going to get treasure, and the goal is to be able to head out into the astral planes and beat up guardians in order to get mighty artifacts. Prophecy is a game for 2 to 5 players, for ages 10 and up, and it's a game that takes a different amount of time based upon the ending conditions that you use and the number of players that you have. This game has been published a number of times. Z-Man Publishing in the US is a way to get it. What I have here is the original edition English translation, and so I'm going to show you the components I have. I'll talk a little bit about how the components are different in some of the other printings, however. So with that, why don't we open up this box and see what's inside. So, what comes with the game? Well, you get rules and a little reference card, which is handy. The board is this large circular track, so as the game goes on, you're going to move around the board having different adventures. Then there's lots of cards with the game. There's cards for different skills in the middle of the board, cards for items, cards for adventures, cards that are chance that determine what comes up each turn, cards for the big major quest you're going for, and then each character has a little doll, well, cardboard doll, and a little placard which gives some information about that character. You get some dice and then some beads, beady, beady, beady. Lots of little beads, and so these are the same beads that were in Through the Ages, because the guy that designed this designed Through the Ages. Woo! So anyway, in newer printings of this game, like the Z-Man printing, I know these components are upgraded. You don't have these little bitty beads you're dealing with. You have some better components for these little things, and I also know that the cards for your characters are very different and they're on thicker cardstock. But those are the components, and they are functional, so why don't we talk about how they all work together in the flow of play. In this case, we're going to talk about the Scout. So the Scout has a character card and also a character stand that you'll use on the board to show where you are. Now, when you start the game, you're going to start with a number of these little pebbles, these stones, these beady, beady beads. I've put out these big ones in comparison. So there's gold, big one's worth 5, little one's worth 1. And there's experience, which are the green things, big one's worth 5, little one's worth 1. When you start the game, you're going to start with 3 gold and 3 experience. In addition, your character is going to have some statistics, and in this case you're going to have strength and willpower. And you're going to start the game with a number of dots, red dots equal to your strength and blue dots equal to your willpower. The other thing that's important to notice about your character is it's going to have 2 locations written on it. In this case, the Thieves Guild and the Forest Camp. And those will be spots on the board where it's more advantageous for you to gain new abilities. Now, a basic concept to get for the game is strength and health. So strength is 5, which means in combat, my base number is a 5. So in getting ready to fight, I'm going to roll a d6. Oh wait, what's a d6? Well, the d6 is a role-playing game term. You say d4 for a 4-sided die, d6 for a 6-sided die, d8 for an 8-sided die, and it goes on up from there. So anyway, you roll a 6-sided die, you're going to add it to your strength, and that's going to be your number. The bad guy's going to have a strength. He'll roll it and add to his die, and that's his total, and you see who wins. Now what happens in the game is when you take damage, when bad things happen to you, you lose your health. And so we also have a representation of health. The way you do that is if I take a point of damage, then I move one of these dots from this side of my card to this side of my card. So that represents that I only have 4 health. So I've lost 1 point of health. And then as I take more damage, I'll move more dots over to this side of the card. Now what's interesting about this is in this game, unlike many of these other games, as you take damage, you're weaker in combat, which makes sense. So now if I were to go into a fight, I only have 3 here, and that's all I'm going to add to my die roll. So as you get hit, it's going to be harder and harder for you to fight until you go and get healed. So that's the balance between strength and health. Strength is your statistic of 5, and it's the maximum number of health you can have. Then as you take damage, you move it to this side of the card. That represents you've taken damage. If I get healed, then say I get healed for 2, I get to move these guys back over here, and I'm back up at full. Willpower works the same way with magic. So I have a willpower of 2, which means I have 2 dots, and these are going to represent my magic. So I can cast spells, and as I cast spells, I move my dots over to this side. Now if I have no magic, it's not a big deal, I just can't cast spells. But if I have no health left, guess what? I'm dead. Your character is eliminated from the game. You discard all of your items and all of your gold, and you may choose to start again with a new character. And that new character will come onto the board. He'll be a little damaged to indicate that he had to travel here, but you can get right back into it. The game comes with 10 different characters, and the characters all have different numbers on strength and willpower, and different places you can go to get your skills more effectively. There's a way to distribute the characters, or you can just throw them out, let everyone pick one. There's a number of ways to do that. But everyone gets a character, gets their starting stuff, and then you set up the board for play. One of the other things that you do during the setup of the game is you prepare these little stacks of cards. Now, in the game, there are 5 of these artifacts, and these are the most powerful things. In fact, that's the goal of the game, is to get those. Artifacts are going to be protected by a lesser guardian and a greater guardian. And so when you want to travel out to the astral planes, you can do so and fight the guardians. So to set up the game, what you're going to do is you're going to make 5 stacks. So you're going to put each one of these magic items in a stack. You're then going to mix up the greater guardians and put them on top of the items, and then you're going to mix up the lesser guardians and put them on top of the greater guardians. And so what you're going to have are 5 stacks that are all going to look the same. They're all going to have a lesser, a greater, and an artifact at various points around the board. And so this is going to randomize in the game. Then this, for example, you have an undead knight who is protecting the item. If you defeat the undead knight, then you get to fight the Storm Queen. And then if you beat the Storm Queen, you get The mirrored shield. Dun, 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 dun. And this is one of the goals of the game, is to get these artifacts. So, one of the things you're going to do on your turn is you're going to move. And so when you move, the board has a track. It's going to be laid out. And on your turn, you can move 1 step for free from where you are. You can move 2 steps for gold. So you pay a gold to rent a horse and move 2 steps. So from planes, I could go 1, 2. Or you can use these modes of transport. See, there's boats. You can pay 1 gold to move on a port to the next port on either side. There's also magic portals, which are these little symbols, and you can pay 2 gold to move from one magic portal to any other magic portal on the board. So those are your ways of moving. Is 1 step is free, 2 steps cost a gold, a port costs a gold, and a magic portal costs 2 gold. So you make your move and then you deal with the space. Now, on these spaces, we'll end up having various encounters appear. And so the encounters are going to be what sort of things are sitting on that space. So you'll make choices based upon what you want to deal with. Sometimes the encounters are going to be face down, in which case you're not going to know everything that you have to deal with when you move in that space. If you decide to move in the space, you'll flip it over, and then in this case there's 2 monsters, and I'll have to fight them both, and I'll choose the order in which I fight them. Some spaces have things that are good, and you can just go to that space and deal with it. How do the cards get on the board? Well, at the start of your turn, you will actually draw one of these chance cards. So the first thing you do before you move is you draw one. This one, for example, says Planes. Place a new adventure card on every plane space. So therefore you look on the board, and every place that says Planes, you add a card. Now any space can have at most 2 cards, which means if there's 2 cards there, you don't add one. But if there's no cards there or 1 card there, you put one down face down. So you won't know what your adventure is until you land there. And again, any space can have at most 2 cards. These chance cards, they're going to do other things like heal players, place cards in forests and other types of terrain. Some of them give you an extra turn. And a warning, one of the cards in here is Economic Crisis. Roll a die. If it's not a 6, everyone loses half their gold. Don't hoard gold. If you hoard your gold, you'll run into this, you'll lose half your gold, and you'll say bad words, which you don't want to do. So you move to a space, you'll deal with the cards. Then after you've dealt with the cards, if there are symbols on the space that are called a possibility, you can use those. So the cards are all going to have different things. Let's take a look at some of the cards now. So one type of card that could appear in the space are these encounters. Now these are usually good things, and they give you choices of stuff you can do to improve your character. For example, a traveling alchemist. Heal any amount of health at 1 gold per point, or recharge any amount of magic at 1 gold per 2 points. Glass Mountain. Its walls are sharp as a razor. If you climb the mountain, you lose 4 health, but you gain 2 willpower from the bank. So that is a way to actually increase your character's ability. Now these cards represent short-term opportunities, meaning if you choose to do what's on the card, after you're done, it will then be discarded and taken off the board. So another thing you could meet are creatures. Rawr! So this creature is a fairly basic creature. It has a strength of 1. Now it says also in a forest 3, which means if you're in a forest space, this is going to be harder to beat. So the way that works is his strength is 1. Let's say that I had my scout who had a 5 strength, so I'm going to get 5 plus a die roll, and he's going to get 1 plus a die roll. And you decide ahead of time, we'll make green the adventurer and red the bad guy. As you roll a dice, you add them up. So mine was 5 plus 4 is 9. His is 1 plus 4 is 5. So I win. Hooray! Now what do I win? Well, it'll say on the card. Its pelt is worth 1 gold, so I get a gold. And also, I get 1 experience point. Here is a giant spider. Now he has a strength of 4, so he's harder. And he has a little penalty if you lose, a spider web. If you want to leave this space and the spider is revealed, lose 1 health. What will happen is if you don't beat the monster or you tie the monster, he stays on the space face up. So in this case, if you're on the space with the spider and you want to leave, you're going to take another hit. In his lair, you find a rare item, so that's going to get you an item for winning and 1 experience point. Some of the animals are packs or groups, and they have multiple lives. So in this case, it's a horde of bats, strength 2, but it says 3 lives. And what that means is you have to win 3 sets of die rolls to beat it. 3 in a row. If you lose 1 of them, you lose the fight. It has also confusion. During this encounter, you cannot use spells. So therefore, you're not going to be able to use spells when you fight this monster, and you've got to win 3 in a row. But you get 4 experience points if you do. Again, if you lose any of them, or tie any of them, it stays on the space, and you lose that combat. When you lose a combat, you lose 1 of your health. There are also monsters that fight with willpower. See, he's got a willpower of 4, which means you're going to be using your willpower to battle him. This one, if you win, the ghost guards a treasure of 3 gold, and it's worth 2 experience points. Some monsters have both strength and willpower, and what that means is that the monster's going to want to fight you with strength. But if you wish, you can turn it into a battle of wills. The cost for doing that is 2 magic, which means if you want to battle something with willpower like this escaped murderer, you have to first pay 2 magic, which is going to reduce your number that you're rolling with. So only do that if you have quite a bit of willpower. But if you had a willpower of 6 or 7, then you might choose, well, I'll lose 2 and make it a battle of wills, especially if your strength isn't good. Or you can just have a battle of strength. Now, as you see, this one has a question mark ability, which means it's your choice. You can try to capture him alive. Subtract 2 from your roll, decide before rolling. So this gives you a choice. You can either try to fight him normally, in which case you'll get 2 experience, or you can try to capture him alive. If you do that and you take the 2-point deduction, then if you take him alive, you're going to get 6 gold as your reward. So some of these combats give you choices. So what'll happen during the game is you'll flip over monsters, you'll try to fight them. If you fail, they'll stay on the board, and then they're a hazard for other people to come and fight, or you to try fighting again next turn. If you succeed, you'll get some treasure, and then you can become stronger, because some of the cards reward you with mighty items. Items come in 2 types, common items and rare items. And so you have to watch if the game tells you to take a common item or a rare item. Now you can carry as much as you want, but in combat you can only use 2 hands worth of stuff. So this is a basic item. It's a wooden shield. If you use this in a battle of strength and lose, roll a die. 5 through 6 means it's a draw, and the shield becomes damaged. Sometimes you'll get things that become damaged, and there are places on the board you can go to fix those. This has a value of 1 gold, which means if you were buying it in a shop, you'd pay a gold for it. You also have the ability to sell your items at half their price. Here's a potion of regeneration. You can drink this on your turn, but not in battle. Heal 1 health and recharge 2 magic. So this, you use it once and it's gone. Here's a rapier. Edged weapon. In a battle of strength against humanoids or other characters, add +1. Here's a rare item. Here is the Sword of Smiting! Edged weapon. In a battle of strength, add +1. For 1 to 3 magic, add +1 to +3 to a single die roll, so that you can actually use your magic to increase your strength in battle. The Elixir of Wisdom. You can drink this on your turn, but not in battle. Gain a willpower from the bank. If you pay 10 experience, gain an additional 1 willpower. Also, I should say, your character can never go beyond 8 strength and 10 willpower. So cards like this will help you out, but you can't just keep adding them and adding them. At some point, you can't become any more willful, unlike a 2-year-old. Now, after you move to a space and you fight the monsters, if you succeed, you can then use one of those opportunities if it's on the space, or possibility. Now, the possibilities are there on the space, and as you've seen, this is a very symbol-based game, so you can just look at the symbols to see what you get. For example, this has gold leads to heart with 3 dots. On this space, you can spend a gold to get a health back, and you can repeat it as many times as you'd like. This space up here gets you 3 magic back. This space over here, the little no move, means that you don't move for a turn there. So you land on the fortress, then in your next turn you don't move. Give up your move and give up a health to get 2 experience. So that's what goes on there. Over on the monastery, it shows 1 health, which means if you use this space, then you get 1 health. This space, you can get as many health as you wish. Now notice both the monastery and the forest camp have these little doves, which means you cannot be attacked by other players while in that space. Oh yes, that is another option, is you can attack another player. Land on a space with them, you fight them just like you fight a monster. If you win, then the other player either has to give up a health or let you pick an item. So in the city, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's transport out. You can not move and pay a magic to get 2 gold. There's also a little money bag, which means you can shop there. And so shopping means there may be some item cards face up and you can buy them. Also, you can sell item cards you don't want at half their value. So if something has a price of 6 that you've picked up in the woods and you don't want it, you can sell it there for 3. Also, in any of the civilized places like the cities or the fortresses, you can get stuff repaired for 1 gold. Now, the last part of the game to talk about is the middle, and that's the most important part. And this is going to be where you improve your character's abilities. These correspond to the spaces on the track here, so the Magic Tower has these abilities. There's going to be at most 2 at any one time, and when you land on a space, you can choose to increase your character's abilities. Now, to do that, you pay experience. So earlier, you pick up the experience from the monsters. Here's where you spend it. Now, if you remember on your characters, it showed you 2 places. So the Ranger, for example, has Forest, Camp, and Fortress. That means if he goes to the Forest, Camp, or Fortress to increase his character, then he just pays that much experience as listed on the card. However, he can actually go anywhere else. If he wants to go to the monastery, for example, he can still get those skills, but he has to pay that much in experience and that much in gold. So the payment is greater if you go outside of your areas of specialty. So let's look at a few of these. So if the monastery has things related to healing, use instead of moving, lose a health, recharge 4 magic. The Magic Tower helps you with willpower stuff. Initiating a battle of wills costs you 1 magic less. They also can help you with weapons. So this is a staff skill. If you have a staff, add +1. If you use a wand on a battle of wills, add +1. The Thievery lets you do sneaky stuff. Wharf Rat, you can use the ships without paying and sail to any port on the board. So it helps you with that. Pickpocketing gets you an extra 2 gold when you defeat a humanoid. The Forest Camp, the forest stuff, a lot of that has to do with moving. So stamina, you spend, so this is a spell, you spend a magic, you can walk up to 3 spaces. And the Fortress tends to be battle stuff, dueling in a battle of strength against other characters or humanoids, add +1. Therefore, as the game goes on, you're going to be able to customize your character to get the abilities you like. And this is what I like the most about the game. In Talisman, for example, you have a character with abilities. And in this game, you get to build up your abilities and take what you'd like. So if you get a Mighty Sword, you can then go and get Mighty Sword skills. So you can be even mightier. Ha! Extreme! The last thing to talk about is the point of the game, going up to the astral plane to get the artifacts. Now on the board there are 5 locations with these glowing astral planes. Woo! You can move to them from either of the spaces that are adjacent to that astral plane. So from the mountains or the forest you can move up into that plane. What will happen is then you will fight. And the way you fight is there will be a lesser guardian on top, followed by a greater guardian, followed by an item. And you do them in order. So first you flip the lesser guardian and you fight him. This is a vampire lord. So this you actually have to do 2 fights, a willpower 5, then a strength 5. And if you lose a health and a magic. If you win, you get 12 gold and you keep going. So if you win, you say, hooray, I won. Then you go on to the next guy. Demon, strength plus willpower equals 11. So he's going to fight you with both strength plus willpower. And if you win, then hooray, you get the mighty item. The Banner of Destruction. So the goal of the game as written is to get 4 out of the 5 mighty items. Once all of the mighty artifacts have been claimed, then the game changes a little bit and you run around the board beating each other up. I don't like this ending. This ending drags the game out for a long time. I much prefer to play with the short game ending, which is the first player to get 2 artifacts wins the game. This makes for a nice 90-minute, build up your character, beat up the bad guys, get the stuff, and win game. And I like it a lot played that way. So, that wraps up the rules of Prophecy. Now that we've talked about Prophecy, let me talk a little bit about some of these other games. Now, Magic Realm, and I just have my box lid here, Magic Realm is the granddaddy of these game types, and this was put out by Avalon Hill back in the day. This was the first big adventuring game, and is still played by folks. It is a good game. It's very involved. They do some clever things with a lot of card and chip manipulation on this large layout that randomizes the game each time. You have a character, you develop your character. Combat in this game is very difficult in that there's a lot of steps to it. It's been out of print for a long time. There's some online implementations of it. It's the granddaddy of these types of games. Now, the next one that took Magic Realm concepts and made them more accessible was Talisman. Talisman has also been through a number of reprints. So in Talisman, you wander around the board, you flip cards, you fight monsters. The goal is to get to the middle of the board and to slay this big evil dragon. Now the ending conditions vary upon the edition of the game that you get. The differences between this game and Prophecy, this game, instead of choosing to move a number of spaces, you roll a die and you move that many spaces left or right around a track. The track is a series of concentric rings, so as you move towards the middle, it gets more difficult. The character development in this game is not as pronounced. In Prophecy, you're developing your character through skills that you pick up. In this game, you have skills that start. When you become more powerful, it's just by accruing better and better items, by getting experience, which you then turn in for more strength. and more craft to be able to fight better monsters. I played this game lots and lots of times, and it's something I will still play, but I prefer the character development of Prophecy. Runebound, this is the second edition of Runebound. It's been out for a little while, and Runebound is similar, but the difference in Runebound is the map. And the map is this open grid, and you wander wherever you'd like. So it sounds great, you can move anywhere on the board, but the problem with that is that this game takes a long time to move. You roll a bunch of terrain dice, and the terrain dice, one die might say that you can go on rivers or mountains, another die might say that you can go on plains or forests, another one says you can go on mountains. And so you have to do a little puzzle of saying, where are the places on the board I can get given these movement dice? So that takes a while. Now once you've moved, if you have an encounter, it works like the others. You flip a card. If it's a monster, you fight it, or an encounter, you deal with it, and you're going to become stronger. As the game goes on, you have the ability to use experience points to raise various statistics on your character. Combat is a little more in-depth than some of these other games in that there are different phases of combat, a ranged combat and a melee combat and a magic combat phase, and so there comes some puzzling in dealing with that. So this game is more involved than Talisman in its combat, and more involved than Prophecy as well in its combat. And because of that, turns take longer. And the biggest complaint about Runebound is the downtime. Runebound, I think, is best played with 2 players. With 2 players, there's not a lot of downtime. You develop your character fairly quickly, and it can be a nice game. If you have the full boat of 5 or 6 players on this, it's going to be a long time before you get to take your turn again, and I would not recommend it. There's also an expansion for Runebound out. Well, there's a lot of expansions actually, but there's one that's a desert expansion that puts it in a desert world, and I really like Runebound with that expansion with 2 or 3 players. Another game in this line is Return of the Heroes. Now in Return of the Heroes, again, you're playing a character, you're having adventures, you're increasing your statistics, you're getting items. This is a quest-based game, so you'll get quests that will say, travel here, deal with this thing, and then get this item, and do this other thing. And the thing about the quests that I really don't like in this game is that some of the quests require you to get a certain item. Now the game comes with a bunch of little chips. In fact, 106 game counters that all go in this bag. And as the game goes on, you're going to be drawing these chips out of the bag. You may need a quest that requires 1 chip out of that bag. And you can't continue the quest until that chip comes out of the bag. Now you can abandon the quest or go on another quest. But I found that aspect of this game to be really frustrating, is that your quest could be held up simply because you can't get the chip out of the bag, and you need to be able to finish the quest to be able to move on in the game. So, didn't care too much for this. And now the newest game, World of Warcraft, the adventure game. Now this is different than the big World of Warcraft game that was covered earlier. In this game, it works similar to what we've seen. You move your character around a board based upon the roll of a die. You land on spaces, you draw cards, you have adventures. This game is level-based, which means there are 4 levels your character advances through in the game. You start out as a gray level character, and you can only go to the gray areas of the board. And then when you're ready, you can fight a big monster boss, and that will take your character up to the green level. Now you can access the green levels of the board as well as the gray levels, and you'll have new encounters. And then when you're ready, you take on the boss, and you are advanced to yellow level and then up to red level. And the goal of this game is to accomplish quests. So in this game, you're going to have some quests you're heading out to attempt to accomplish. In this game, character development, while it sounded interesting that you're going to go up from level to level, you go to all this trouble to go up levels and very little would actually happen, other than it unlocks more ports of the board. And so I was disappointed in this game in that the character development really came from item development, from getting better items as you go up in levels, rather than getting to see your character develop. And that's what made the World of Warcraft board game, the big one that takes 2 teams against each other. In that game, your characters actually increased considerably with lots of new skills and talents. The other thing that makes this one a little different is you have a hand of cards, and so you can play cards to improve your character's abilities in one combat. But unlike these other games where most of the stuff, if you get it, you have it. In this one, you have cards, and you'll use those cards up. You also get items as well. So between this game and Prophecy, I like the character development in Prophecy better. I feel that my character develops during the game experience. If you've played World of Warcraft, though, you'll get a lot of giggles out of this one, where you're going off to fight Murlocs and things like that, and you can make your Murloc noises as your Murlocs die. Anyway. So if this sort of game excites you, this would be the one I would suggest to pick up. It's the one that I enjoy the most. I enjoy the character development, that you can play it in 90 minutes. I enjoy that you have choices over your movement, but not too many, so it keeps the game flowing very quickly. It's my favorite game of all of these fantasy adventure games. So now, if you'll excuse me, I must quest to see what my prophecy shall hold out in the great wide world. So until next time, thank you, and I'll talk to you later. Farewell, adventurers! So why don't we get right into the game I'm going to talk about today, and that is prophecy. Now in prophecy... Hello. You also get a bunch of these cool wooden tulip pieces. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong game.